Welcome to Buffalo Pregame, your source for live Buffalo football discussion, news, analysis, opinions, and more. Presented by ASM Publications and Bills Digest.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Buffalo Pregame. My name is Alex Brasky, here with you for another episode following another day of Bills training camp. Excited to have Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills on the show today. Not exciting circumstances surrounding his appearances all the time, but he's a great guy and provides great analysis for Bills fans. Each week on Buffalo Pregame, I'll provide updates on the NFL, NHL, and more via daily articles, podcast videos, and more. Please subscribe to Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, along with the Buffalo Pregame with Alex Brasky Substack, all of which are free of charge. So day 7 of Bills training camp, we had Max Hareston out for 3 weeks. That was released on Wednesday, but on Thursday, we received news that Cole Bishop was out for practice with a quad injury, and also Joshua Palmer, the wide receiver acquired this offseason, also left practice with an apparent injury as well. And, of course, a long laundry list of other injuries to get to as well. And without further ado, we bring in our guest, Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills. Doc, thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. In between visits, and you're getting this done out of your car, so much appreciation from me to you.
Absolutely. Got to try to squeeze this stuff in where we can, and there's a lot of information to go over, so I'm looking forward to talking about everything.
All right, let's start with Max Hareston. We know about the injury he sustained. I know it's kind of a unique injury, the LCL. You don't hear that all that often. I know that Andy Young of Spectrum News saw Hareston after today's practice on crutches. So what do we know about that LCL injury? What's the prognosis, the timeline for recovery, everything that Bills fans need to understand about Maxwell Hareston's injury?
So that was probably one of the best case scenarios, that he had a LCL sprain, which is pretty rare. According to the literature, it's like 2% of knee injuries. So, I mean, it's just not one that was on anybody's bingo card when you're looking at potential injuries, especially given the drill they're doing, and then knowing what they're looking at, the assessment from head trainer Alex Brasky, and then just everything else that went into that. So basically what happened is he likely somehow got his foot caught in the turf, and either he hyperextended the knee somehow, or the foot got caught in the turf and the leg kind of got planted, and then his body continued going another way, straight in the LCL, which is on the outside portion of the knee there. So this isn't a injury that always requires surgery. Sometimes it does with higher grade tears, but they can heal pretty reliably without surgery. The fact that Andy Young saw him in crutches and a brace, we don't know if he's non-weight bearing, which can happen in some cases there where they want to protect the area, or whether he just needed crutches to help support the knee. The brace is there to make sure it's locked out in place, so it's not stressing the knee as he's trying to bend it and move it around there. So this is all normal protocol, thankfully. We don't know how long it's going to be. I've seen some protocols saying it's up to 2 weeks, but we know how the NFL, with its resources and the literature, supports that they can come back sooner from this, but they also don't want to be too aggressive and try to rush him back either. Most of the literature is showing that it can be anywhere from they said 3 weeks, and Ian Rappaport's, Adam Schefter's, but we're probably going to see closer to a month, maybe 5 weeks. That might leave him being available health-wise for week 1, but whether we actually see him play week 1 is a whole nother thing because of those lost reps like we saw with Cole Bishop last year. So there's a small chance there could be other problems later on down the line in terms of other ligamentous issues such as ACL, PCL, MCL. There are certain cases like Traylon Burks had this issue a few years ago, and then later towards ACL. Robert Griffin III also had the same issue where he tore his LCL and later had an MCL tear. I will keep in mind, though, both of those guys had previous ACL tears in their history, so that could have contributed to that. So what I'm trying to say is there's a chance that there could be some problems, but Hareston doesn't have the medical history that Griffin and Burks had. So they're going to take this slow. They're going to make sure they don't rush him back. They're going to make sure his confidence is up and that he can do everything. And when he does return, he's not going to have a brace or he's not going to have any really restrictions. So it's like, we'll make sure he's going 100% until he's ready to go there. So it was a best case scenario, all things considered, but we're not going to see him rushing back and maybe some football activities toward the end of August.
Yeah, so the 3-week timeline we saw from Ian Rappaport, obviously best case scenario, like you said, probably closer to a month for Maxwell Hareston. And there was a lot of speculation surrounding the injury. It was good to get the news released. We haven't spoken with Sean, or we haven't heard from Sean McDermott yet, speaking to the Bills media. So we will hear from him tomorrow, either before or I believe after the return of the blue and red. So be sure to stay tuned for that. And maybe we'll have an update on the timeline or something of that nature at that time. But why don't we talk about Cole Bishop next? We'll move right along down the line. What do you know about his injury? There isn't as much that we know about that injury as the Maxwell Hareston one. It was just described as a quad injury before today's practice. I didn't see him hurt himself during Tuesday's practice, but I did see him jogging off the field with athletic trainers or walking. I can't remember which at this point. And then he came back on the field with his helmet, wearing his helmet on the sideline with his teammates, but did not re-enter team drills on Tuesday. So I was keeping an eye on that. It wasn't really widely reported that he had left that practice, but he's back perhaps in the near future with that quad injury. But what do we know specifically about Cole Bishop's quad that left him without practice?
Like you said, we don't know a whole lot, but considering when you say a quad, either you're thinking a contusion or then you're thinking a strain, to the muscle. Considering he kind of just left quietly and then they got him checked out, you got to think one or the other, especially with the recent introduction of the pads, them hitting and whatnot. So it's going to come down to just what timeline they give. You hope it's contusion and they're being cautious, but there certainly could be a strain. He does have some soft tissue history with a hamstring in college. And then obviously we saw last year with the shoulder or whatnot. So we need a little bit more information on this, how long he's going to be out. But I mean, with everything that he went through last year, they're not going to be rushing to try to get him back out there. And the extra days off like they had yesterday is certainly going to help them to make sure that he's going to be ready to go for when the time comes.
And how about Josh Palmer? I don't think we really know anything about his injury. I posted some videos. Some others did as well. Did you take anything away from those videos? Have you heard anything in your passings by on X? What do we know about Joshua Palmer's injury? If anything, he left individual drills, was talking with athletic trainers, and then later just stood off to the side to watch team drills. So no participation in team drills for Joshua Palmer on Thursday. What do we know?
Not much. I saw the video. I think you posted that he was off to the side with the athletic training staff, and that he was doing like high knees and kind of just seeing how his body responding. So that makes me think that some type of lower body injury, whether it's like a hip flexor or whether it's some type of hamstring or even a knee, where just trying to make sure that how the body responds to those activities there. But they're smart to hold him out. He also has a history of different injuries that have really kind of held him back. When he was with the Chargers, albeit he was also deeper on the depth chart, there being Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, and those guys there. So they're smart to be holding these guys out, especially with the heat being the way it has been recently, though today was a little bit better. So we'll get more information on Friday before they practice at the stadium. But, they're just being cautious, especially with the rash of injuries that we're seeing. There's no sense in getting guys out there. And then you look at for the UDFAs, the guys deeper on the depth chart, you might as well give them every rep possible because you might find a diamond in the rough through all that there too.
Yeah, there were a few wide receivers who returned to practice, albeit in limited fashion, on Thursday. You saw Elijah Moore participating in individual drills, had a wrap on his left calf. You had Tyrell Shavers returning for individual drills from that ankle injury, and KJ Hamler also returning. I don't think Tyrell Shavers or KJ Hamler participated in team drills either. I think Hamler was an illness, so not injury of concern there. But how about Elijah Moore? He's been a player that's sustained, I believe, a few injuries throughout his career, and this seems to be another soft tissue thing with some general leg soreness, maybe isolated to his left calf.
Correct. Yeah, we saw that there was some type of tape wrap on the left leg. Prior to this, he had been wearing a white sleeve on the area. And sometimes when you see those type of things versus the black compression sleeves, it's hard to tell whether it's more of a style thing or whether it's truly for a medical issue there. So it seemed like that was more of a medical issue where he was dealing with it. And then, like you said, it was definitely more in the calf area. So, whether that's one of the deeper muscles like the soleus or whether it's more of the gastroc and the more superficial muscle, he's working through it. It's good to see him still out there playing, but they want to make sure that's not going to be more of a chronic thing going on. I can't remember off the top of my head everything that went into Elijah Moore's medical history. He's had some injuries, but it's not been too crazy where it's like, it wasn't a Curtis Samuel or a Laviska Shenault or some of the other guys we've signed where it's like we're just waiting for the next injury for him.
Yeah, Curtis Samuel's still not back practicing. He's off to the side in street clothes. He has been working with athletic trainers, though, so that's been a good sight to see for Curtis Samuel as he works back from that hamstring injury. Another pass catcher, Dawson Knox, returned to the practice field from a hamstring injury. He was placed on the non-football injury list to begin off season. He had been working with athletic trainers in recent days after being removed from NFI on Sunday. He was out there in full gear, did not participate in team drills, however, seems to be taking it slowly, is Dawson Knox. And I don't think they need to rush him back. A veteran player knows the system, knows his responsibilities. Anything quickly on Dawson Knox? I'm sure it was just kind of a tweak and something they wanted to give some rest.
That's pretty much what I'm interpreting it. I did see him doing a blocking drill today and specifically pushing off on his right. There wasn't any limitations, but he definitely wasn't going 100%. And he's had hamstring injuries before. Like you said, he's a veteran. They're not rushing this back. And we don't know the exact time frame, like when he exactly injured it. I assumed right before training camp, like the week before, but it could have been even before that. It could have been, the day before they reported. We don't know, but they're smart not to rush him back considering he has had his share of injuries. And you don't want to lose one of your veteran tight ends, especially one that's been more of the blocking tight end.
Right. And Bob comments in, when's the next issue of Bills Digest releasing? And we also had Luis earlier call you the Dr. Ryan Fitzpatrick with the luscious beard you got flowing right now. But Bob, it's releasing in late August digitally, and then it will be in mailboxes and within stores in the subsequent days. So late August, early September. Please subscribe, BillsDigest.com. We released our training camp preview, and Dr. Kyle Trimble will have an injury roundup in our preseason issue coming up, like I said, late August, early September. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast and the Substack account. You can do so on YouTube. Hit that like button. It would really, really help us out here at Buffalo Pregame. Would really appreciate you doing so. But, Doc, let's move it right along here, right down the list. And Spencer Brown, the offensive lineman, right tackle, has been out throughout training camp. He's on the physically unable to perform list. Today we saw the first action from him with athletic trainers, and it was some pretty good action. He was going through blocking drills, really getting that bend in and that kick step. So it was good to see from Spencer Brown doing some football movement, and it seems like he could probably come back soon, but I would imagine they'll continue to be very, very cautious with their starting right tackle.
Correct. And, like you said, this was the first real football specific stuff we've seen. He's been out there doing the ladder, kind of just going through the motions with the rehab. But to see the kick step, I was really happy to see how his feet were moving. They were fast. He was confident with his movements. He was doing all of these stuff he needs to do to ramp up there. We still don't have exact details as to what flared up in the back there for him. You hope it isn't a disc issue. That can happen because he did that the microdiscectomy back in 2022. He didn't have any prior issues with that. And I do want to keep in mind, even though there's a history of that, that was the only time he was on the injury report for a back. So it was 2021, his rookie year, he injured it. And then he tried to manage it and then got surgery in the offseason during the OTAs. And then he was slow to come back. But he doesn't have a long history of the back issues. It's just, we know it's an issue with the microdiscectomy, and then just what's causing this latest issue there. If it's another disc, if it's a facet, if it's something else going on that is causing these issues. Hopefully we'll get a little more details as to what's going on. But they're smart not to rush him back given his long injury history as well. Just want to make sure he's ready to go and not try to rush him back out there like he did after his the first back surgery.
Yeah, 3 players with veteran rest today. Deion Dawkins, so they were without their left tackle and right tackle, the Bills today, and that led to some shifting. You had Ryan Vandermark at left tackle, Tylen Grable at right tackle. Edge rusher Greg Rousseau also held out with veteran rest, and defensive tackle Daquan Jones. Now, I want to go through the laundry list here from the other day. Some of these players have returned, so I'll have to sift through. But you have the 2 linebackers, Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams, hamstring and calf injuries, respectively. We'll start there. They both appear to be on the way back, working with athletic trainers, but we did see Dorian Williams in a walking boot. Is there any further elaboration you have on either of these injuries?
Not with Bernard, just because we don't know what side he did it or how he did it. But he's been another guy with lung injury history. Let's try to make sure they give him the time to, not push through that stuff right now. And then Williams, it's normal to see them in a boot for a day or two just to make sure you're not stressing the calf as you're pushing off of it or as you're loading the heel to push to do into stance phase when you're walking. So they protected it. He's been out of the boot for a few days now since I think Sunday or Monday. Yep. I think Monday it was. And then he's been slowly rehabbing back. So, they're going to rely on him a lot, and they're not going to rush him back. And it takes roughly 2 weeks for a normal calf to kind of come back. They can take longer with higher grades, but then you worry about the risk of re-injury in a calf more so than a hamstring or a quad or things like that. So it sucks that they're all missing these reps. But once again, those guys fighting for those roster spots, they might as well soak up every rep they can to give themselves a shot at making the either active roster or practice squad.
And we got, I think, 2 more here. What about Alec Anderson? It was announced today that he went through a knee scope to maybe do a little bit of a cleanup there. Probably going to miss at least a couple of weeks. He's declared week to week. What's the prognosis there? How long do you think it'll take him to return, the Bills' jumbo lineman from last year?
That was a little bit of a surprise because we knew that he was wearing a sleeve on that left side before. That had been since the second week of OTAs, that last weekend in May before they had the mandatory minicamp. And that was a side he had injured his calf on during the postseason last year. So sometimes you see those injuries linger a little bit, or they wear the sleeve just to make sure they can get through their activity and workouts okay. And then he came off on Monday, motion to his left knee, got checked out, didn't practice Tuesday. And then you see his wife post on TikTok that he had surgery 3 hours earlier that day, and he's doing overhead press with like 10-pound weights or so with his knee all wrapped up there. So like you said, it sounds like a general clean out, whether there's some type of, meniscus trim out or whatever else, loose body cleanup in there. I know that the team said week to week. I know that Alec Anderson has spoken to Jeff Brady, who is student body right with Dude Champions, and he says he's going to be back, next week there. I believe he'll be back rehabbing pretty quickly, and he'll be out doing stuff on the side. But you don't want to make sure that knee blows up on him with the inflammation or that he's having problems getting strength back there. So I expect him to see him out probably the next 2, maybe 3 weeks. Week 1, unless he has setback, could be jeopardy, but he's probably more likely to be pretty close to it. But that's not something you rush back right now with it being, July 31st. It's get the rehab right, make sure the knee's fine so you're not having problems down the line, come week 6, week 7.
And lastly, Tyler Bass, pelvic area soreness, an interesting injury. Can you give us any insight on that, what that could be from a kicker's perspective? He missed 4 of 8 field goals in the wet weather a few days ago, and he's been out the past few days. So can you give us any insight on Tyler Bass's injury?
The use of pelvic soreness is oddly specific, and I mentioned that on X. That kind of tells me that it's not just like your groin, it's not necessarily hip flexor, it's not even like a back, like a sacrum or lower back issue. There's other structures in there. Somebody in the Cover One Discord, which I'm in there, suggests a kidney stone. Like that could be, but it's been lingering for a little bit longer. Usually that stuff passes with some pain medication and lots of water. Sometimes they have to blast those things out. I don't know his history with that there. Then you start wondering if there's some type of structural thing, like there is the pubis symphysis in the middle where that connects the pubic bones in the front there, near the groin region, and basically where your genitalia is out there. So that could be some discomfort in there. There could be some, if I pronounce it right, the ositis pubica. I don't think I pronounced that correctly, but there's so many other possibilities of that there. There could be some irritation in that general area that whether the kicking brought it on or something else. Like, there's so many different possibilities. It's interesting the phrasing they use, because that's going to tell us what happened later on. But I don't have the full information to say this is definitely what it is or what timeline is for him to come back there. So it might be more telling if they bring in a kicker, if he's missing more time. But
Right.
we're going to know more once they give us more. I wish I gave you more, but then I'm just shooting blindly and hoping I get something right there.
So do we miss anything? I think we were pretty thorough here. Is there anything that you'd like to go over that we failed to touch on, or maybe a grand scope statement here? Anything that you'd like to leave to people?
I don't think we're missing anybody without looking off the top of my head. I mean, you mentioned heat illnesses. Any guys like AJ Epenesa came back pretty quickly after his ankle. It's good to see Tyrell Shavers return to practice pretty quickly. So if we missed anybody, it's going to be pretty minor. I see the guys like DeMar Hamlin. He's wearing a brace on his right shoulder. He hasn't been missing practice. But little things like that aren't really impacting their ability to practice. But I know that everybody's been worried about the injury bug going on. And I highlighted this on Tuesday, where the injury rate that we're seeing is pretty consistent with what we're seeing last year. Last year was up quite a bit compared to other preseasons. It's not great to see, but we've seen how the Bills have been more cautious with regards to their injuries, especially in the preseason as they get the regular season, because last year was a pretty good season in terms of the number of injuries and the severity throughout the regular season versus losing guys, left and right through the regular season. So it's good they're cautious now and getting some of the injuries out of the way rather than dealing with them during the regular season. And then they're missing guys for longer duration because they're trying to be too aggressive when it didn't really matter.
All right. Dr. Kyle Trimble of Banged Up Bills. You can find him on X or his website, bangedupbills.com. Anything you'd like to plug, Doc, before you get out of here?
Just make sure you read my work at bangedupbills.com. There's a great article about Maxwell Hareston's LCL sprain up on there. A lot of people have been finding benefit in reading and better understanding what the injury is. You can find my work on Alex's Substack, the Buffalo Pregame. My work on the Bills Digest when those issues come out. And then I also do some work for DL Fantasy, and you'll be seeing my work coming up soon, talk about the fantasy football aspects and how the injuries impact their performance.
All right, Dr. Kyle Trimble, busy guy, and we're grateful that he was able to spend a few moments with us discussing Bills injuries. Great insight, Doc, and we'll be in contact soon. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, Dr. Kyle Trimble. Great stuff from him as always. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Hit that like button. That could really help us a lot here on Buffalo Pregame. But let's reflect on a few of those injuries, beginning with the Maxwell Hareston injury. With Hareston now out, we heard from defensive coordinator Bobby Babich before practice on Thursday, and one of his comments was that rookie cornerback Dorian Strong is set to receive more reps as a result. Now, starting with the first team on Thursday was Dane Jackson. It was him alongside Tre'Davious White, interestingly enough. Christian Benford just spending some time on the sideline. But then you did see Dorian Strong mixing in there and competing against some of the Bills' top pass catchers. And this kid has been holding his own throughout training camp. Had a nice pass breakup today. I didn't get a clear look at it. I had it as Ray Davis, but Zach Davidson was also in the area, and I was kind of blocked by some equipment between me and the play in the close end zone nearest the Bill store and the bathrooms there. But Dorian Strong, in my opinion, could be another Christian Benford level find. I don't know if you're going to see him inserted into the starting lineup as quickly as Christian Benford was. I don't think the need is quite what it was at that time, considering the signings that the Bills made at the position in the offseason and how comfortable they are with Tre'Davious White apparently starting opposite Christian Benford come week one. And then, like I mentioned before, you do have a veteran in Dane Jackson who's been in this system before. So I don't know if you're going to see Dorian Strong thrown into the fire in terms of starters reps or a starting position anytime soon, but he's going to get an increased rep share, and he's going to kind of sharpen his tools a little bit quicker than he would with an even more crowded room with rookie Maxwell Hareston occupying so many reps during the practice period. So Dorian Strong continuing to elevate his game, but I think for now, in terms of the pecking order, how it's impacted with Hareston out, it's White, it's Jackson, and then it's Dorian Strong. in terms of that outside cornerback position. And then you also have to mix in Jamarcus Ingram, who factors in to the conversation as well. Speaking about safety, with Cole Bishop out today, it was Damar Hamlin in there with the first team. So it looks like Hamlin is the immediate backup, not only to Cole Bishop, but also Taylor Rapp, able to be a bit versatile back there. And with Hamlin at one point, at the same time that Jackson was in there with that first team, you had Benford and Taylor Rapp off to the side. You had Damar Hamlin, Cam Lewis, and Dane Jackson in as starters with Tre'Davious White in the Bills secondary. So it looks like Damar Hamlin is for sure the backup per se right now to Cole Bishop. I know he hasn't exactly won the job yet, but it looks like the Bills are giving him every opportunity to do so. This calf injury, of course, will hold him back, similar to how the shoulder injury held him back a season ago. So that'll be something to monitor. And if he's out for extended time, I'm sure we'll see a whole lot of Damar Hamlin in there at safety. And that's not what fans want to hear, but I think he's the second best option right now. And maybe even the top option it'll prove to be if Bishop's able to get back healthy and then display his stuff during the preseason. Damar Hamlin is as steady as they come, and I think he's the safe bet at safety, especially when you lose what you would like to be is your starter in Cole Bishop. Derek Forrest, he's an interesting name, and he does have experience playing in somewhat a similar system as the Bills with Ron Rivera, but he doesn't have the experience that Damar Hamlin does. He doesn't have the experience that Cam Lewis does, and I think the Bills really favor that in terms of their secondary. So with Hareston out, with Bishop out, it's Dane Jackson, it's Damar Hamlin getting the immediate opportunity with that first team. We mentioned the linebacking group with Dorian Williams and Terrell Bernard both out. It's been a battle for that backup middle linebacker job between Balin Spector and Joe Andreessen. Both players have taken turns making plays throughout the offseason and training camp, and both players seem to be getting somewhat equal share of the reps with Terrell Bernard out with that hamstring injury. And you can't forget about Shaq Thompson, the free agent veteran that they brought in this offseason. He'll get some time in there as well if those two players continue to be on the sidelines. So a lot of mixing and matching at these positions on defense with the injuries occurring both at linebacker and in the secondary. But let's get to a few updates from the practice field today, and really only a couple. It wasn't that heavy of a work day. I thought the aggressiveness and physicality early in the practice really stood out to me, but as the practice wore on, the Bills kind of took the foot off the gas, went through some walkthrough, slowed things down during team drills. But early on, Ray Davis, quite the run during 11-on-11, working near the red zone. His ability to slither through defenders and just find his way, keep his contact balance. And I know that it wasn't exactly tackling today, as they had shells on. They didn't have their full leg pads, and I think they weren't doing as much tackling today as they were the previous 2 days. And some defenders, I think, gave a little bit of pushback to officials and coaches with their whistles, thinking that that play should have been blown dead. But at the same time, Ray Davis burst through the right side. Small as ever was the crease. He's able, like I said, to slither through all the way 20, 30 yards for a touchdown. And he doesn't have the same game-breaking ability as James Cook, but this is a game changer. This is somebody who we saw in limited work last year behind James Cook find his way to productive performances, and Ray Davis showing signs of brilliance today during Bills practice. And finally, to end this podcast, Keon Coleman continues his strong offseason. And what I'm most impressed with is the consistent approach that the Bills are taking with him day to day. They're really working him in a ton along the offside. He's taking wide receiver one type reps and targets from Josh Allen. So they're trying to refine that connection and trying to help Keon Coleman increase the speed of his progression as he looks to take on a more assertive role within this Bills pass game in his second season. And I've said it all offseason. We don't need to harp on it too much, but his confidence is really at an all-time high, and it just seems like he's ready to take that next step. Now, I would like to see him matched up with Christian Benford in the return of the blue and red scrimmage on Friday. I think that would be something fun to see, as Coleman was shut down by Benford in day one of training camp, but since then matched up against what I'll call lesser defenders, he's really been able to shine. So it would be interesting to see him matched up once again with Benford and see what he would have to offer in that situation. But quickly back to Ray Davis, you don't know what the future is going to look like for James Cook beyond 2025. And what he's showing you in flashes throughout practice is he has the ability to lock down a running back one type role. Now, I don't know if he's ever going to give you, like I said, the game-breaking ability as James Cook, snap of a finger, he can be gone for a touchdown. But the way that Joe Brady and this offense has developed over the years, I think they can find a way to best utilize Ray Davis's skill set. And you put him behind this offensive line, anybody pretty much is going to have a good chance to run wild. So that's about it for the updates from the practice field. Jimmy had a question about my coverage. It doesn't look like I'm going to get media credentials for the season, so just keep tuning in. We're going to find a way to cover the team, as we always have. I haven't always had media credentials on this beat. I started on the beat in 2018, had them pulled during COVID for whatever reason, and when I made my plea for credentials at the outset of this season, I was once again denied. So I have pretty much put an end to this saga where each season I'm kind of worried about if I'm going to have credentials, how much access I'm going to have, is it going to go away the next year? So we're just going to press forward the best that we can here on Buffalo Pregame, and that's about it. We'll find a way to cover the team. We'll bring you the updates as we always do, and we appreciate you tuning in as you always do here on the show. But that's going to do it for today's episode. I appreciate everybody for joining me, and we will see you next time.